Well, hello and welcome to Work Cookie, our weekly gathering of IOs, recruiters, HR, and one actor, as we try to make the world of work just a little bit better. LindaAnn, we're going to continue our discussion today about strategic alignment. We've been sort of going down that path for a little while, but today we're going to actually talk about it when it comes to recruiting, which is, as far as I probably kind of a new thing, because we're just getting our organizations aligned and engaged, and we've hopefully got them to that point. But we're always going to need more people to come into organization, especially if, as you said last week, we could see up to a 20% increase in productivity if our staff is aligned and engaged. So we want to recruit people who are going to add to that even more. So where right now is the industry with looking at this?
Well, I haven't found where there's some data out there that shows, like, for example, I saw where Gallup did a meta-analysis of data. And what they found on this topic is that for low turnover organizations, that they have a 59% less turnover rate when employees are engaged. And if you have a high turnover organization, that impacts that organization with a 24% reduction in turnover rate. So it's significant, right? And high turnover organizations are just an industry, like say restaurants or hotels are just inherently high turnover. But when you get them to be engaged, it does have an impact on the reduction. I think what's important to understand, and chime in everyone on your perspective on this, is that when employees are engaged, they're committed to the organization. It is serving them somehow. Right? Not only does it serve the organization, but when you create that connection that makes it beneficial to the employee, then they're more likely to stay. And the thing that really can impact your recruitment process is having that complete employee engagement as part of your employer brand, excuse me. So that when people are going out into the community or talking about their employer, they communicate to whoever they're talking to how much they enjoy their employment, how much they feel like they're committed to them as employees, and then when you talk about Gen Z and millennials, and you can connect them to that purpose, and they feel like they're serving the higher good or something outside of themselves, which is really where, when you're recruiting, you need to focus your time right now, because that's what they're looking for in their next job. And so when you go through the process of strategic alignment, you help people understand that connection to the higher good, and then they can convey that to others. So I do have a couple of things. There's an article in there from Harvard Business Review about helping your employer brand, helping you stand out in the talent marketplace. And there's three components in that, from their perspective, are important. And the number one piece, they call them the 3 C's, and that's the career catalyst. And that is, will working for you forward my career? And that's what they care about. When you're recruiting people, you have to understand that it's what you're looking at and what you're marketing to potential employees is what you offer them. And that's a big mind shift for a lot of employers. But that's how you need to communicate it. It's basic sales process, right? When you go out and teach sales in the market, the old sales process was, well, we do this, we do this, we do this, right? Not focused on what does the prospect really want from you? What are their needs and things like that? And that's a complete shift also. So when we're approaching to get people to engage with us on any level, it needs to be about what benefits them.
Right. Well, let me ask you, because we've talked before about if you have to replace an employee, it's about 1.5 times that annual salary in costs. Even with engaged, aligned organizations, sooner or later, someone's going to leave. Hopefully it's for an advancement. They're going to move on to something better. So now you're in that position where you need to recruit. And we've often talked about how job descriptions, yeah, they ain't working for me. And they're usually not really refined. So do we have to look at the whole recruitment process and revamp it?
Yes, and that's, I'm going to pull up, if you don't mind, and I put it in the chat as well. This is something that I used as kind of a flow chart. And let me see if I can share my screen. This is new from, oh, there we go. Share my screen. Can you see that? Let's see. Can you see that? My screen is?
I can see half it.
Here we go. There we go. Is that?
Yeah, better.
Okay. So this is a complete process. And so if you look at the process, for me, we start as the foundation in strategy, right? There's 3 tiers to this. There's strategy, alignment, and engagement. There's 3 components to each level. So in the strategy level, you're clarifying the purpose, helping people on making sure that it's concise and conveys what your purpose is as an organization. Then there's values and vision and your strategic clarity. Those need to be foundational and communicated clearly to your employees, right? And they need to understand that. Then in the next step, and we've gone through this process in this month, right? In our conversations, then you align your leadership, help them understand how they perform and create that performance expectation that supports that strategy level, the purpose, the visions, and the strategy. Then you do your leadership development and you align your employees, right? When the employees are clear about the alignment, you also do your employee development, and that's your career planning. And so when you do a complete career plan and help them identify that path for growth within your organization, and they can see their future with your organization, that is a complete cycle that leads you into the ability to recruit talent by telling them, helping them understand this cycle and how it benefits them. And what we're really looking at then is a culture of engagement, which is a result. It's not a thing. So when you do all of those things in sequence and in cohesion, then people are engaged, and that's the result of all these efforts.
Yeah, this is fascinating to me, and it sort of starts at the beginning where I don't think I've ever gone to a job interview where they've talked to me about how they're going to develop my career so that I can advance with the possibility that I might leave one day. So I've never actually even heard of anybody who's gone to a interview for an organization where they've talked about the potential to develop my career. So is this something which is good in theory, but not a lot of people are practicing it right now?
Well, I don't, it's important that, for example, I think that there's not a lot of people practicing it. And that's the real opportunity that many organizations have right now, is that it can be a real differentiating factor. When I would recruit, one of the first questions I would ask is, why did they apply for this position? And what was their dream? What was their career dream process, right? Where did they want to ultimately end up? That did a couple of things for me as a recruiter and helped me understand really what they wanted to have as far as support in their career. But it also helped me recruit the people that were good matches, because I would communicate to them that part of our organizational culture was to help people identify their career path and have professional development and move their career forward. And that's not something that a lot of places are doing. And it made it very attractive for them to come into our organization, and I would start that process with them from the very beginning. The other thing that's important for organizations to understand is that uncovering what the recruit's value system is, and does that value system align with yours, is very important, because if you don't have alignment in value systems, at some point down the line, there's going to end up to be a real dissonance between how they perform their job and what the company expects as employee behavior.
You know, if I was sitting down with you and you were trying to recruit me, and you showed me this, I would think this is absolutely great. But I'm also wondering the gap between what organizations say and what they do. So as someone potentially coming to the organization, I might see this chart and go, this is absolutely fantastic. This is what I've been looking for. But the lived experience may not be the same. So whose responsibility is it in the organization to make sure that we don't go off track?
You know, for me, is my role in human resources, making sure that that was part of how each of the hiring managers also worked with their employees, and making sure that we do the 90-day expectations and reviews, and making sure that each step along the way, their career path is being included and supported. So when we did performance reviews, those questions that we had in there was always discussion of what do you need, where are we going, and doing those incremental checks to make sure they're moving forward on the path that they need to be moving forward, as well as meeting the goals of the organization. It's a very conscious, purposeful effort.
I got one more question for you, and then Lee, we're going to go to you. But aligning leadership, sometimes I imagine is not easy. What are some of your experiences with, sitting with the C-suite or the people who are in charge and getting them to align the organization and use this sort of chart?
Well, you need to bring it back to how does it really benefit the organization. They want to know. If you tell them, you have 59% less turnover, and you do the calculation out of what turnover really costs, then you have their attention and there's motivating factors there. I mean, you can't beat around the bush that it's all about the bottom line for a lot of things, but the awareness of how you really get there and contribute to the bottom line is not always clear to them. So you need to make it clear.
Thank you for that. Lee, let's go to you.
My screen moved and I couldn't find the mute. Yeah, if you spend any time looking at what's going on in the job hunting, arena from the other side, and I talk to a lot of students and early career and all that kind of, and I see the stuff on LinkedIn or whatever, all the things, all the check boxes, do these things when you're looking for a job. And, some of the things that they tell you to do are, obviously research the organization. And, our friends at the search engine of your choice will be happy to provide lots of information on that company, including some sites that, have, employee, or maybe even more importantly, former employee reviews of that company. And one thing that seems to be more prevalent is doing informational interviews with an organization that you're interested in. And so when you contact someone and you're saying, hey, look, I don't want anything from you, just to take some time and to ask some questions. And you ask them things like, well, what's the organization like? What's the culture like there? What's a day in your life look like? And you start getting those questions when you're not actually asking for anything. You're not asking them to look at your resume. You're not asking them for a job. You're just like, I'm just interested in knowing more about the organization. And if you build that rapport and there's basic level of trust, then they can tell you some things and you can kind of get an idea. Do they align with what I'm looking for? And you can ask things like, yeah, so what's the continuing ed kind of thing like? Do they have a program? Do they have a training thing? And or they may just say, hey, look, don't apply here. You know, you- I've heard of people being told that, like, look, I'm looking for a job, don't apply here. And you can save yourself some grief there by figuring that out ahead of time. And so from the other side, I mean, I've been interviewed several times where they have asked me, what my career progression, what my intentions were, where I wanted to go. And I've had them in interviews say, hey, look, we've got this great training program or continuing ed benefits or whatever, kind of as a hook to draw you in, hey, look, we got these things, we're going to help you grow, we're going to help you go places. And it's good from the interviewer perspective to kind of start getting into that stuff because, as LindaAnn said, turnover is expensive. And, if on hiring, I want to get kind of a feel of, are you going to be here for a while? Are you going to get, are you going to make it through your probationary period? I mean, what are you going to do? Because even a short-term employee can cost up to twice their annual salary to replace them. That's awful expensive for 3 months.
Yeah.
And I know I personally, when I interview people, I ask them, I mean, what kind of a thing are you looking for? I mean, this is what we have right now. These are kind of our prospects, how things go. I mean, I want to be upfront with them about that. I want to be transparent because it's better for both of us. They walk in and don't get, an unhealthy surprise, and they don't turn around and leave on me. So that is important. And of course, I mean, I've talked about my current situation where I have a lot of contractors where, I have limited scope on some of those things. And so we have to be very clear about what I can or cannot do for you in order to, sweeten the pot, as it were. But it's important to have those conversations. And unfortunately, I mean, as Linda had said about the sales process, I mean, sometimes the sales process isn't as clean and pretty as we would like. And you really need to be above board when you're doing the recruiting and the interviewing. You really do. Too many people to kind of pull that bait and switch and stuff, and that's not okay. You really need to be above board. And people talk. The word gets around.
Yeah, it's really not a great way to start a relationship. Let me lie to you so you come work for us. Thank you very much, Lee. Dr. Martha, let's go to you.
I think one of the realities is that theory, or the ideal way we would like for things to be, and how things really are not always what we would like them to be. So, Lee brought up the idea of simply reaching out to a company to get a feel for what things are like. There are plenty of companies who will not talk to you just to talk to you. If you're not applying for a position, or if they don't have an actual opening, they don't have the time to take the time. And that could be taken as a reflection on the culture, but it may simply be that they're already overwhelmed with everything else that they have to do. When it comes to interviews, whether or not a company or an interviewer asks you what is your plan for your career, or where do you see yourself going, or even if the interviewee brings it up, it could be taken the wrong way. Are you asking me so that if I tell you I want to advance and you need someone to learn the job and stay put, you're going to pass on hiring me, right? And it's the same thing on both ends. So it's nice to talk about how it should be, how we would like it to be, but we have to be realistic of what goes on at a lot of companies. And so much of what goes on at a company will depend on what goes on at the very top. And it doesn't mean that this is limited to small companies where you see the owner walking about and having conversations with people. This can also happen in large companies where you have upper management or middle management who are in direct contact with non-management employees. How they conduct themselves, how they speak, their level of commitment to the company and to the employees will make a tremendous difference. So someone, let's say in the HR department, can put their heart and soul into creating a certain way, certain scenario at that organization. But if that is not supported or reflected by management, then they're going to have a very difficult time making that into a reality at that company. So I know that we want things to be a certain way, and it would be nice if things were a certain way, but we also have to have a certain sense of reality that not every company you reach out to just to say, hey, how's it going, is going to talk to you. That doesn't make them a bad company. That doesn't make that person a mean person. They may simply not have the time. And whether or not your future with the company is brought up at the interview, that could mean something, that could mean nothing. So we really need to make sure that listeners take what they hear with a grain of salt, because the ideal is great, but they're not going to encounter that everywhere.
With that in mind, I know actors, we hate auditioning, and that's our job interview. And when I talk to young actors, I say, well, treat it like a 3-minute performance. You actually get a chance to use your skills and go in there and have fun. But I know some of the IO psychologists have done training sessions for individuals who want interview skills. They want to, have a better opportunity at getting that job. So is there a real lack of knowledge about how to even be a good candidate in an interview?
Some of that will depend on who's interviewing you, because if there's a high skill level on the part of the interviewer, it will behoove you as an interviewee to also have a matching level of skills when it comes to the interview. But when you're one or both of you are kind of fumbling through it, and sometimes interviewers want to do or try to do whatever they need to do in terms of questions or comments to get the real you to come out. Because anybody can put on a show for a few minutes, but you want to know who you're really getting as a potential new employee. Are they the talent of your dreams that they appear to be, or is this a mask that will become your nightmare come Monday morning? So there's a lot of moving parts to that.
I also want to say I also sing and dance. So there you go. I'm the perfect. Thank you very much for that, Dr. Martha. Rich, let's go back to you.
Good morning. Thanks a lot. Hey, well, first of all, Tom, my kid is an actor and he loves auditioning. So I don't know, maybe it's an anomaly, but
Maybe he's a lot more successful than I've been.
Well, I think it's that ability for him to actually, treat it like a performance, so all eyes on him and he's a happy camper. So anyway, as I was thinking about this topic and listening to everybody today, but in preparation for this, I couldn't help but to think back to my time in my MBA studies years and years ago, where we read From Good to Great by Jim Collins, which says get the right people on the bus and put them in the right seats, and so I think, in fact, Jim Collins has another thing where he says, who first, what second, right? So it's really about having having those values from the top, from the leadership level. So the companies that I've seen that have done very well in attracting talent, doing very well in supporting their people and retaining people for, sometimes 30 something years, they have operated under some kind of a system. The ownership And I'm talking about, privately owned companies, right? But they have coaches, right? They've either adopted a system such as like the entrepreneurial operating system, EOS. Some of them have used Vistage, which is another executive coaching firm, and there are many other ones that are out there. But they work within a framework, and almost every one of those frameworks starts with vision and values as those two components on the leadership level that guides everything beyond that. And then, Jim Collins, again, bring him up again, but he talks about having a level 5 leader. So a level 5 leader is somebody who is really focused on hitting those strategic goals and being aligned to those values, but it's also humble about it. So, they allow the people to do what they do because they brought the right people in. And that part of that bringing the right people in, there are, the way IOs can help with a lot of that is, you have a visionary, and now I'm talking about EOS, but you have these visionaries and you have these integrators, right? A visionary is the one who has, at the top, they're the ones who are coming up with, what those visions are, what the vision is, and what those values are. And the integrators, right? The people who can they're kind of the boots on the ground, right? So you got the head in the clouds and the boots on the ground. Let's put it that way, right? So the boots on the ground, the IOs can go in and actually perform the work analysis and the job analysis. I think it was Locke and Latham in their motivation book that said, if you go to anybody, and they say the first step is job analysis, you're on the right track because it really comes down to making sure that everything aligns to the strategy, and that strategy comes from up top, right? When you can do that, and those people are aligned to the values of the company, and you're using some valid and reliable techniques to and multiple techniques, right, to ensure that people have the right KSAOs, knowledge, skills, abilities, and other characteristics, and the right cultural fit, the right values that fit in with the company. Then I think you've got something that is like really, literally strategically aligned. And it sounds like a pipe dream, but I have met some companies in recent past that have done a remarkable job of this, where really they get the management and the team together in these level 10 meetings. That's an EOS thing, right? Where everybody is very open. It's an open book, and that clarity and transparency goes a long way to having a culture that is, strategically aligned all the way through.
Well, let me ask you, because, as you mentioned, this is information that you've had access to for quite a while. That this is a possible way of doing things and works really well. How much is new information that we're presenting even today, and how much is information that's been there and perhaps we're just repackaging it a little bit? The reason I ask is, one of the names that's out there right now is Simon Sinek, who's, I love his material, great
Start
books.
with why.
Yeah. But that's not new. I'm reading his book going, I heard this 20, 30 years ago. But I guess a lot of people didn't really grasp onto it. So a lot of the stuff that we're talking to today about getting strategically aligned, especially for recruitment, has that knowledge been out there for quite a while? We've just maybe got some more research behind it. We've made things a bit more solid, but it just comes down to doing things in a certain way that will make your organization run really efficiently.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. There's more data than ever now, right? So if it's tried and true, and I don't want to, that's actually a very bad way of putting anything, because it's not true across the board, but if it's been around, right? We have more data now to support those things. We also have more data to to go against some of the things that we thought were true, in the past. So, yes, are some things true and well, again, not true, but are some things, does the evidence support that some things work better than others? Yes. But there are certainly plenty of myths that have been dispelled also, throughout the years.
Yes, myths grow faster than the truth sometimes.
Right.
Thank you very much, Rich. LindaAnn, let's go
Sure.
back to you.
I think on that point, because that's kind of when I've listened to Simon Sinek, I've like, this is nothing earth shaking for me, right? So, and I've been doing strategic alignment for 30 years. So, but I think what matters, what makes a difference is need, right? Has there been a need from the employer's perspective to do anything differently than what they had, right? And so now your employee pool is looking for different things, right? They're not buying into, well, my benefit from working with you is a paycheck. That doesn't fly anymore. So of course, then you need to look at, well, a little deeper and say, what does work with this audience, right? And so when you do that, and again, it's not rocket science. When you just think from the perspective of the employee about what they're looking for, then you can have a greater understanding of what's going to work for you. It's just like any other marketing process, is what is your prospect or your potential client or customer looking for? And so you have to align with those needs, and one of the things that in reference to what Dr. Martha was talking about is one of the things that I've done and I encourage people to do is pre-interview questions. So that after you have somebody apply and maybe you do a screening call, you send them pre-interview questions. That gives them a little bit of a taste for what some of their skill sets are. You can also put some behavioral questions in there that will reflect some of their value systems. And then when you go through the interview with them, you have those questions, you have an idea, first of all, if you even want an in-person interview. And then the interview takes on a different life, right? You have some of the information and you can spend some time talking to that person as a human and what they're looking for, as well as some of the experience that you're looking for them to bring to the table. From the employee side, one of the things we would encourage prospects to do was, if they wanted to work for the organization, to contact someone on LinkedIn that is at an equal level to where they would be in the organization and have a conversation, go to get a coffee or a beer or something like that, and ask them what it's like to work at the organization. That benefited the organization as well for two reasons. One, the employee got a clear idea of whether or not they really were interested. And then when the recruiting process, whoever that was, me and the hiring manager and so forth, we're talking to the individual, we usually found out whether or not they had interviewed with an employee. So we also had that employee's perspective. And there were times that, the employee would say, oh man, get them on board, or, yeah, I don't think they're going to be a good fit. And we would listen to the employees, we would take into consideration what we had as an experience, but also take that into account as to whether or not they were a good fit for the organization. So that's one step that organizations can take, that again, doesn't cost any money. Either of those steps don't cost any money. And for me, when I work with companies, the goal in recruitment is for them to create a reputation so that they are an employer of choice, right? I want to create a situation with an organization and their alignment so that they are a company people aspire to come work for. And that provides a complete pipeline of people wanting to work for you. And that can help in your hiring planning process, right? I've worked with companies where they had people contact them. They were good fits for the organization. And we're in our hiring process where we've got people lined up 6 months out. So, okay, in 3 months, we're going to hire this, so-and-so is committed to be on board. You have to maintain that relationship. And then in another 3 months, we've got somebody else and they're filling our needs in our hiring plan. So if you do this really well, it can also cut any of the recruitment costs.
And I think we've talked before, and wouldn't this be true under this type of alignment, that your best recruiters are your current employees?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because, word of mouth travel, that's the best marketing of any kind for anything.
There you go. Thank you very much, LindaAnn. Lee, let's go back to you.
Oh, man, so much. Wow. It's always the hard part about coming after LindaAnn. But and actually some part of what she said, whenever, I'm the hiring manager, but ultimately I'm not the guy who hires. I bring team members into the interview and I let them do the interview and I just hang out and listen, and I throw in something if I need to, I'll do the intro. Here's something about what we're doing, answer questions, but I let their potential teammates and their team lead ask them questions and then give me their opinion on this person and whether or not they think they're a good fit for the job. Because I may think they're fantastic and the other guy's going, oh, dude, this guy. Oof. And I don't want to settle them with that person. So, I like to include the other people, it's just better for everyone. And, just the little plug for the IOs here, go to the bookstore, if you actually still go to those, and look in the self-help section. It's a big section. And a lot of that stuff is not really backed by much research. But we all know when you go into potential employer or something, or your boss even, and you mention research, their eyes glaze over and they start to drool on themselves. So you have to do that part. You have to look at the research. You have to say, okay, this has got some solid stuff behind it. It's not just pop culture. Like they, Rich and LindaAnn both said with, the Simon Sinek and all this stuff. A lot of this stuff is not new. Some of it's just repackaged, mumbo jumbo, and some of it is legit stuff that there's some research stuff behind that you can go, hey, look, we know this works. Or it didn't work before, it's not going to work now. But that's kind of on, on really on the IO or whoever's filling that role to kind of look at that. And actually, another thing that LindaAnn said that I just love is pre-interview questions. And especially in today's world, as we know more about people and whatnot, there are many very, very qualified neurodivergent people who may be applying for an organization who, because of their unique way of approaching the world, may not interview very well. At least not not unprepared. And if you can give them that leg up, because they may be the thing you need, but you'll never know if you put them in a quote regular situation, because they're not going to perform to their best. But if you give them that little bit of a pregame, and you got to do it across the board. I mean, you really, you should. And there are some organizations that if you ask, they will. But there's nothing wrong with you offering that information up and then give them that little bit of time to kind of be prepared for what you were going to ask, because there are a lot of brilliant people out there that if you put them on the spot, they're going to go, and then, 10 minutes later, they're going to be like, I got the most brilliant thing you've ever heard. But unfortunately, the interview is over at this point. So giving them that opportunity can be, just paramount of importance in that kind of situations. Because, there are a lot of people who are missing out on some really, really fantastic candidates just because they want to do things the way we've always done it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I can't count the number of times where I've been with organizations, they were hiring someone who I was going to be working with, and me sitting there going, why am I not involved? Why, if they're working with me, why don't you invite me into the process as well? So I'm glad you said that. Thank you very much, Lee. Rich, let's go back to you.
I just wanted to say that my marketing heart fluttered when LindaAnn said that you need to that organizations really need to know their audience, because that people first approach, which I taught that in my marketing course this last term, and it really is something that works on the marketing level. But boy, we're selling positions, essentially within organizations, right? So um, I any of like I had the opportunity to work with one of my clients recently because I helped them with their website, right? We built a whole careers section of the website which talks about their culture and their values and what what they're all about, right? Because they're trying to attract an audience. And it's not just that messaging, it's also where are they hanging out, what are they, what are their interests and all of that, right? So you can actually target your message to show up at the right time to the right person. Um, so all of that, like if I think that if recruiters, think with that kind of marketing, people first marketing mindset, build out a persona. Like, what does this person, this candidate look like? Give the person a name maybe, but you got to be careful with that too, because that can bring some bias in, right? So you have to be really careful about bringing in, what that persona is going to be, and take that kind of with a grain of salt. But really though, looking at starting with that job analysis, what does this person need from a KSAO standpoint, from a task standpoint, from a competency standpoint, and then a cultural fit standpoint. How does all that work? And then tailor the channels you're going to use, the communication, the message you're going to use, and how you're going to conduct the interview process, and make sure that whoever is doing the interviews is trained on all of that too, right? So they're not just flying solo on that type of stuff.
Well, I think that's one more thing that managers are not trained in is how to conduct an interview. So once again, especially those middle managers, we need to get them trained up. So contact an IO psychologist. Anyways, thank you very much, Rich. Dr. Martha, let's go back to you.
One of the things that organizations can do is participate in events such as job fairs, for example, and maybe even host an open house, inviting potential talent to check them out. That's a really good way of having people come in, having those semi-formal conversations, asking the questions that maybe someone else doesn't have time to answer during business hours with a one-on-one phone call to everybody. But it allows you to have the person a little more relaxed, ask the kind of questions they would like to ask about the organization, and really shake things up. I don't see that happening as much as it used to. But I think it's an opportunity that organizations could engage in and are potentially missing out. And if there are no job fairs in your area, as an organization, you connect with your Chamber of Commerce, for example, or other organizations, and put something together, work together on attracting people, having people come to an event, having people be proactive in checking out your organization, other organizations in the area. So I think that there are potentials that maybe are not used as much as they used to be. Maybe they've gotten forgotten. We are so technologically focused that maybe it's all about social media now, and this is how we post and communicate and this and that. But there's a lot to be said for people coming in, checking out your facility, talking to current employees. You all get a feel for each other. So that's an opportunity that I would like to invite organizations to consider as they're looking for new talent.
Sometimes it's good to go a little old school and use some of the things that used to work. Thank you very much for that. LindaAnn, back to you.
So along the lines of what Dr. Martha and Rich were just saying, and that is to really understand what is visible to your potential employee or client or whatever. So where is it that they are looking for information, or where do they get exposure to the information that you have for them before you start doing that shotgun approach, just going, throwing everything out there, spending money on a lot of things that maybe your particular recruit isn't even aware of or inclined to use. So it's really important to make sure that and I did that the other day with an employee who wanted to start working on business development. And that was the first thing I said to him was, go find out where you would be visible to those potential clients.
Mm.
And where do they get information? And for this kind of thing, it would be, where do they look for employment opportunities, or where do they look for information about companies, or where do they get exposure, for example, on LinkedIn or wherever you're posting, about the things that are great about your company, where do they find that information? So that can make things a little bit more focused, I guess. Also, what was I had one other point. Oh, training the interviewer is key to what Lee had to say. And that is, and I've noticed, some people are more open to the training than others, but all of your recruitment process can be spectacular. And if you have a crappy interviewer, then either the people aren't going to want to work there with that particular hiring manager, or they're just not going to, the interviewer isn't going to find out what they need to know to make that good decision about going forward. And I remember working with an employee, a hiring manager, and I don't know, 3 or 4 solid clients went through the interviews with them, and every single one of them took a job somewhere else. And I was like, what the heck is going on in those interviews? I'm like, we need to sit down and talk about and have a training session, and I want to sit in on the next interview because something isn't going well, and I didn't send hiring managers 7 and 8 potential candidates. I prided myself as a person recruiting to give them really good, solid matches. So if 4 of them are going somewhere else, something's wrong. So there's a piece to that as well.
Well, let me ask you as well, because you mentioned the phrase employer of choice. And I know, especially in the last few months, talking to a few organizations, they want to brand themselves as an employer of choice. And my first question to them is, do you actually know what that means? And it seems to be becoming, something like your value statement, where organizations want to put that on their website, but they're not doing the work. So how do they transition to become one of those employers of choice?
To listen to the last 5 interviews, podcasts we've done. but it's work, and there's no doubt about that. This is a constant effort, right? And one of the things that are in that Harvard Business Review article is, what's the employer value proposition, right? What are we offering you really? And there's plenty of companies out there that have this kind of image people want to work for, but their reputation as an employer isn't good, and so they're really shooting themselves in the foot because of their reputation of how they treat their employees. And even though I would want to work for that kind of company, or because they're at the top of the market or whatever, I don't want to work for them. So you want to make sure that it's creating that sense within the employees that this is a great place to be on a daily basis. And it's not because you have a ping pong table.
There you go. Listen to the last 5 podcasts and then contact LindaAnn, and you too can be an employer of choice. Thank you very much for that, Dr. Martha. Let's go back to you.
I think having interviewing skills is just one more thing that so often is an assumption that people get hired for management position, but they have no management skills, they have no people skills, and they may not have any interviewing skills. So LindaAnn brought up such an important point. But beyond that, there's so much more to that interview, which is why what Lee brought up, the idea of having more than one person present at that interview for representing the company is so important. I worked with a manager who was absolutely impressed by nothing all the time. He thought everybody was overqualified. He wanted to give them $1 million because, you know, they've mastered potty training. But if there is someone else at the interview, they can bring him down to reality afterwards and point out that, no, that is not all that impressive. Stop being impressed by that. But that just gives you another opportunity as an organization to really have your ducks in a row so that, you know, we all walk away from a conversation, from an exchange, from a situation with our own perceptions of it. We all have our own lens of everything we experience and everything we participate in. So if you have the one interviewer, you are solely getting feedback that is filtered through their own lens. And it's like what LindaAnn said about sending really good candidates to the one person and the candidates go elsewhere. Do you think it's that interviewer? Potentially, right? So having not only good interviewing skills, but whenever possible, having multiple people present so that they can not only interact with the candidate during the interview, but also kind of fill in the blanks for one another afterwards so that more than one perspective is then presented regarding the potential candidate and the interview.
Really good advice. Thank you very much for that. Lee, let's go to you.
Yeah, no, that was great. That was great stuff. But I want to circle back to the employer of choice thing for a second. You know, to something you'll appreciate. Methinks he doth protest too much.
Mm.
You know, if you are saying that you are an employer of choice, just like somebody saying, I'm an influencer or a thought leader or whatever, there's a difference between you saying it. Because if I call myself any of those things is one thing. If Tom says it about me, that's a totally different level. And so if you want to be that employer of choice, don't say, hey, look, we're an employer of choice. No, you do the things and you get other people to say it. Not because you're slipping them a $5 under the table, but because you actually are doing the things and you get on that Forbes list or whatever that says, here are the employers of choice for 2024. And then you go, hey, look, this recognized entity is saying that we are an employer of choice. Now we're cooking with gas now. So now we can have a conversation. But when you tell me, okay, I mean, I can tell you a whole lot of things about myself. I could have a really high opinion of myself that is shared by absolutely no one. And so, you really got to kind of, this reality that's got to intrude upon the situation. And absolutely, if you're wanting to be that employer, get out there on the internet and do some searches. There, information on your company and possibly on you is out there. See what people are saying. Your reputation is what people say when you're not there. And so go look and see. Go to a Glassdoor or something, and or Yelp or any of these things, and see what former employees are saying. And and figure out what your reputation is, and that's what they think. You ever watch that show, Undercover Boss?
Oh, yeah.
Fascinating. The big boss goes in and finds out, maybe things in my organization aren't quite what I thought, or my upper management are telling me. So, sometimes, it's a good idea to get down in the trenches and figure out what the heck is actually going on. Like they say, do you want to talk to who's in charge or someone who knows what's going on? It's an important distinction. And you should consider that.
Yeah, you definitely should. Make things a little bit better. LindaAnn, back to you.
I wanted to bring up the point when, and what Lee said is actually spot on. It's really about what your employees are saying when they're not at work that matters. And a lot of times people will target companies that are on the great places to work list.
Mhm.
And that is a great piece of information. That doesn't necessarily tell you whether or not they are clearly strategically aligned and whether or not they're going to do a career development plan for you and bring you through that process. So it's important to be knowledgeable about those things, but to really dig deep to make sure that if that company has all the perks and bells and whistles, that they also have some meat to them and they're going to serve you as well as you serve them.
Well, I think maybe I should talk to Jeremy and get the CBOC certification for employer of choice. And maybe we can have some awards every year. That would be fun. Well, LindaAnn, with that, our hour is up and we've spent the last 4 or 5 podcasts talking about engagement and alignment, being strategic about it. Is there, thank you very much for all the information you've brought to the table for us. Is there any sort of way you can sum up everything we've gone through to get organizations to really get on track, to get aligned?
So I'll send Jeremy that outline that I shared with you, that flow chart, because that's really a summary of the process. Now, understand that there's a lot of content that goes to some of those steps, right? It's not just oh, let's do that today kind of thing. But it is a guideline for how to sequence and approach and make sure that all of your aspects of your company are set up so that the company can function in alignment, can use the tools that it provides you. Whenever, for example, if you're looking at your values and say you have communication or quality or any of those kinds of things as your value system, whenever there is a performance issue or a decision to be made, bring it back to, is it serving this value? And that really changes the aspect of how you work with someone to get them back on track and how they're functioning within the organization. It's a really, really simple and powerful tool and process. So I would say, understand one, engagement's not a thing, it's a result. And so in order to get that result, you need to go through all of these steps and work at it.
Thank you very much for that. And if you're enjoying the podcast, there's lots of opportunities for you to get involved with CBOC. We have our weekly Work Cookie recordings, which happen Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern. And if you go to the CBOC website, cboc.com, you'll find lots of information, including if you are in the Northeast US region, there's going to be an IO Psychology meetup. Check that out. It's on May 30th. Lee, I see you're going strong with the IO Psychology mixers. How are those going?
They're going really well. We got a good, strong group of people who show up, kind of like we do here, and then we have some who tiptoe in from time to time and drop some wisdom on us, and then we do get some new people that are kind of come in and come in and out. Good stuff. A lot of knowledge thrown around that room. I'll tell you what.
And not just for IO psychologists, because I always try to make it. I usually get tied up with something else, but I promise you I will eventually return.
We look forward to it.
Thank you very much. And next Thursday, we're going to be moving on to cyber issues. We're going to look at guardians of cyber resilience, leveraging IO psychology to defend your business in a digital age. I never thought of IO psychologists as defenders of business, but hey, good on you. There's also going to be a CBOC meetup in the Midwest US region. That's happening on June 11th. And on June 12th, the IO Psychology student meetup is going to be happening. That's June 12th at 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. online. Rich, Dr. Martha, Lee, LindaAnn, do you have anything coming up that you'd like to mention?
I don't have anything new. This has been taking up some time, so I'm looking for a minute. So, so I don't have anything on the books right now, but I want to really thank everybody who's attended all of these and shared their wisdom and contributed to offering all of this information to our listeners.
Well, I've certainly learned a lot, so thank you very much for that. And I think that's probably a pretty good place to wrap this up. So LindaAnn, if you want to count us out, we'll see everyone back here in 1 week's time.
Absolutely.